and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And in this video we're going to continue to work on the engine of Old Rusty. Meanwhile, I've placed it on a jig. As you can see, I mounted a radiator on the side. It is not the radiator for Old Rusty, but it's one I have laying on the side, and it will be more than good enough to do a few test runs. But before we can do the test runs, there is a load of work to be done still. Let me show you what we're going to do in this video. There are many auxiliary parts that I still have to put up. For instance, we'll have to rework and clean up the intake manifold. You can actually see that some of these studs are broken off, so we need to replace these, drill them out, and then put new ones in. We're going to sandblast it on the outside. We're going to blast it at the inside so all the channels are clean. This is a recovered dynamo that we will have to rebuild. You can see that the pulley is broken, so we have to get a new one or find another one that we can match and then fit it on. So that's going to be a bit of searching. Not sure about all the rest of it. I might actually decide not to put the dynamo up, but to replace it with an alternator. But if I want to stay original with the U23, then I better fix the dynamo. And of course we need to be able to crank up the motor, so I need a starter motor. This is a starter motor of a U23, but you can see the state of the cables, but that's not too bad. So this starter motor we're going to take apart, clean it up, check the brushes and check the rotor. We'll measure it all out, and maybe I will need a new rotor. The Bendix, that looks still quite alright. And we will have to mount the flywheel. Now this flywheel has some damage on the crown or the teeth, where the Bendix grabs into, so I might not reuse this one. However, I have a second flywheel which is in really good shape. This is one that I've got from a spare engine that I picked up in France. I guess with a little bit of taking off the edges here with some sanding paper or even a very soft disc, this will be all right, and we can reuse this one. I think it looks a bit better, but we'll see when everything is cleaned up which one is the better one. And this is the water pump. I've got two of them. In fact, I have actually three of them. One is taken apart already, which is laying in the barn in the back. I picked it up in France last year. The original that was on the truck is this one. So I may have to change the bearings. I may have to change the seals on it. I have some spare parts for it, so we have to clean all that up, take it apart, verify it, and make sure everything is all right. So as you can see, guys, there's still a lot of work to be done before I can actually start spinning up the engine of Old Rusty. So you can't run a car or an engine like Old Rusty without a carburetor, and this is a Solex. As you can see, a very common carburetor. I already have pushed it into the ultrasonic cleaner in its totality, so I didn't take it apart yet. But for sure we'll need to take it apart because all the channels will be guaranteed be clogged up after being sitting there for so many years. In general, it doesn't look too bad. You know, everything seems to work, all the levers, nothing is broken on it, so I will recondition this one. Now, this specific one is a 32 AIC, and I don't know exactly what that stands for, but I have a whole raft of other Solex carburetors, and these are also 32s, but these are BICs. I have actually three of them, and they look very similar, as you can see, but there are differences. For instance, the opening is a lot bigger on this one, and there's kind of an extra, I think either nozzle or vacuum tube, not sure. Anyway, we're going to take the original one apart. We're going to clean it up. And if you guys can tell me something more about these Solex carburetors where I can find all the details, then I would really appreciate it. And this is the fuel pump. This one I already took apart once just to have a look how it looked like. And we'll talk more about this once we're going to start to renew this one before putting it back onto Old Rusty. For this one, I actually have a kit, a revision kit to fix this pump. And that's probably the first thing we're going to do. And once we've done this pump, then we still need to work on this very nice but very old air filter. This is kind of neat, I think. So this we're going to blast with garnet, and then we're going to repaint it. I think this will look quite nice. I actually like the shape of this. So now it's time for me to start cleaning up things. So this is the mechanical fuel pump of Volt Trusty, and it's a typical fuel pump with a membrane inside. So this part here will rest on a notch on the camshaft, and while the camshaft is running, it will push this notch up and down, and it will move a membrane inside the pump up and down, so it's going to create vacuum and pressure. Now, to control the vacuum and the pressure, there are two valves inside, and I'll show you those shortly. Now, if you run out of gasoline, you will have to prime the carburetor and you have to prime the pump, and you do that by pushing this lever. So if I push this lever up and down here, as you can see, you can also see that this part is going up and down, and that's normally where the pump would be driven from, the camshaft, as I said. Now, to take this apart, you have to undo a couple of nuts and bolts, not a lot, but I already have done that to save some time, and I already have cleaned up the pump in the ultrasonic bath to some extent, not to have it all too dirty. So the first thing you do is remove the bolt on the top, and then the lid comes off. Now inside you will find a filter, a very, very fine copper-based maize. And this is your fuel filter on top of the fuel pump. So let's put that aside. The next thing we're going to do is to open up the fuel pump, and therefore you remove all these bolts that are in here. I already did it, so we can now just lift it up. And this is the actual membrane. So when it's going down, it's going to suck in fuel. When it's going up, it's going to push out fuel. Typically these membranes, they wear out over time. So let me take that off, because it's just kind of rubber. This one is not too bad. It's still intact, I think, but still you want to replace those if you're going to recondition fuel pumps. Very old technology, but very efficient. Now this is the top cover of the fuel pump, and what you see here is a little hole, and I can push on it and I can feel a little valve. But let me flip this over to show you the valve system. So one is the intake valve and the other one will be the exhaust valve. And here we go. So let me open up this little plate here, and then you will see better what I mean. This little piece here, that's part of the valve, and it's been pushed up by a spring, very similar to that one. So that is the valve that goes in there, and there's another one laying in there. Let me see if I can get it out. And here you see the spring, see that? And that's where this little valve or this little plate is sitting against, like so. So you have two valves, one on the left, one on the right. One is intake, one is exhaust, and spring-loaded. Both of them are spring-loaded. So these are the parts that we might want to replace when you recondition the fuel pump. Before we're going to put the pump back together, everything must be absolutely clean, because if it's not, you're going to have problems with the carburetor afterwards. So make sure everything is absolutely clean, and brake cleaner is a very good tool to use for that. This is the old membrane and this is the new membrane. So I'm going to put the new membrane up together with this holder, and this way. It's going to go on the pump, but not right now. This is the old filter, and this one is the new filter. As you can see, quite nice, and it all comes with a revision kit, so I got lucky to get one. So we're going to put the new filter up. We also will put up new valves. These are the new valves, these are the old valves, a new seal for that valve cover, and new springs. Now I placed the springs on a magnet so they don't blow away with the wind, because it's a bit windy with the door open. I just need to get enough light. And of course we're going to have a new seal for the top of the pump. And that's about it. And then another small seal that goes all the way on the top for the bolt that holds down the cover to the pump. And that's about it. And this is how we're going to put it together. But I want to show you something very important on the springs. That's the old spring, and here is the new spring. You see how much taller that is? And that will give me a bit more pressure on that valve. So that will make my pump work a lot better. And of course the valve itself is this little piece that goes on the top of it. See? So it's always good to replace those springs. We're going to start to assemble the pump, and the first thing we're going to do is to make sure that this bottom part is right in the middle. It should not be sitting on the sides all like this. It should be nice in the middle. You can push it down a bit and you should feel pressure from a spring. Right, so make sure that spring is good, that the pressure is good. If that is not good, then you have to replace this bottom part. Now in my case, I don't need to do this, so that's a good thing. Right, now what I'm going to do for sure is put some grease below. Wipe it clean. And the next step is to take the new membrane and then put it up. Now this comes in multiple plies, so it's better to put one ply up at a time. Make sure that the holes align. The next ply. And keep filling that up until you have all three of them in place. Make sure it's pushed all the way to the bottom. And then you can put this panel up. There we go. Put the little seal up and the nut. So using the bolts might be helpful to align the holes. Let me just do that. All right. So now I know everything is held in place nicely. And now I'm going to tighten down. Once the nut is tight, make sure that when you push it, that it doesn't rotate. It shouldn't be doing things like this, right? So if you push it down, make sure that the holes line up and let go, and it should not rotate. So if it rotates away, that means that this little spindle in the bottom is being turned because you were tightening up the nut. But that looks good. All right, so the next step is to fix the valves. So we're going to take off the old springs and we'll put on the new ones and see how much taller the new ones are. In fact, they are a bit wider as well. So let's see if they fit properly. Yeah, they do. So we're going to put, first of all, the new spring in, then the valve with a piece of plastic. Make sure it's nice in the middle. We're going to place the second valve all the way on the bottom on the other side. And we got to make sure it covers the hole nicely. There we go. And we will add the spring to it, which is this one. And now this is going to be a bit tricky to put the cover up. I already put the seal up, and you really need to push down the seal on the edge here. So this side will go into the spring and the other side will touch the valve. So now that might be a bit tricky to get all this properly in place. I don't think the spring side will be much of an issue. So let's try. Yep. There we go. And that's in. Check that the valve is working. And it is. And then we can put the screws in. Just make sure it stays in place. Put the other one in, and I will double check the other valve if that valve is correct. So let's check it. This is the valve on the other side. Works nice. And the next step is to put the cover up, and you got to make sure that, of course, you do it in the right direction. But you don't have that many options anyway. In this case, the intake should not be facing the engine, so it is not keyed. So you need to, sort that out a little bit. Try to find the right spot. I like to use some of these small screwdrivers to, kind of position things. All right. So let me start putting in the small screws. And then we close up the complete cover. I'm not going to keep you guys busy watching me turning in all these little screws, but you get the idea, right? All right, so the cover is on. So now we can put this fuel filter up. Remember this nice copper filter? This is the brand new one. Hopefully it fits, and it fits quite well. It's a bit of fiddling, but it fits. All right, then we put the seal up. Then we can put the cover up, the bolt with the seal, and try to lock it in place. And we should be having a working pump, which we will test in a few seconds. You don't need to over tighten this. It just needs to be enough to seal around the whole edge, and this is a Kirk seal, so that should be all right. Okay, so now let's see if it's going to work or not. And this is it, guys. We have reconditioned the complete fuel pump, so now we're going to test it. That's a very low cost repair set. I think it's around 15 euros, so that's not too bad. And you get a working pump again in very good condition. So let's put it in the vise, and I'm going to hook up a hose, and then we put a cup of fuel next to it and see if it's actually pumping or not. Into the spot and see if it's working. Now there's a little bit of fuel in the fuel pump because I tried it before because initially I had the hoses backwards. So let's pump and see what it does. It's sucking up the fuel, as you can see, because the hose was empty, and now you see what comes out on the other side. See how good this works, right? So now I'm pumping the fuel from one side to the other. So I think the fuel pump is working just fine. All right, good. To me the fuel pump is okay. So now we're going to mount it onto the engine oval rusty, and then we continue with something else. All right, so we're going to install the fuel pump now on the motor. And for that we're going to use the seal. I oiled it already a little bit, and when you put the seal up, make sure that the bottom part is having the hole, because the camshaft will throw up oil. It will be on the mechanism, and it has to be able to leak back out into the carter through this little hole. And here is our pump. Now I'm going to grease the shaft here a little bit, not a lot, but it's going to take a bit of time before there's actually oil coming up that, and I don't want to scratch the camshaft or damage the camshaft or damage even this shaft here. So it never hurts a bit of oil or grease. All right, so let's put it up. If I don't drop my screws. That's because of the grease on my fingers. Don't think that everything is always going smooth. Even in my place, so although it may seem so sometimes on the videos, but in reality things are not always that smooth. And I'm using new bolts wherever I can, because after all this is a rebuild and I want to have it looking a bit decent. Now I'm done with reconditioning the fuel pump. We've put a new membrane in, we put new valves and new springs, new seals, and then we tested the fuel pump on the bench, and that was all just working fine, and then we finally mounted it onto the block. So folks, that's the end of this video, and I'll see you in my next one, and thank you for viewing, and by all means please make comments.